Hi, hello, welcome to Spell Day. We're covering a spell every single day of the year from the 5e PHB plus 3. Those specific spells are homebrew spells. We're at plus 2 at the moment. You can back and play us to find it. And today's spell is Raise Dead.
Rise from your grave. Thanks for using this Hyperion New You station. Please die again.
5th level Necromancy, casting time for 1 hour, range of touch, components verbal, somatic material, a diamond worth at least 500 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. Duration instantaneous. You return a dead creature you touch to life, provided that it has been dead no longer than 10 days. If the creature's soul is both willing and at liberty to rejoin the body, the creature returns to life with 1 hit point. The spell also neutralizes any poisons and cures non-magical diseases that affected the creature at the time of death. The spell doesn't, however, remove magical diseases, cures, or similar effects. If these aren't first removed prior to the casting of the spell, they take effect when the creature returns to life. The spell can't return any undead creature to life. The spell closes all mortal wounds, but it doesn't restore missing body parts. If the creature is lacking body parts or organs integral for its survival, its head for instance, the spell automatically fails. Coming back from the dead is an ordeal. The target takes -4 penalty to all attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks. Every time the target finishes a long rest, the penalty is reduced by 1 until it disappears. So, I'm re-recording this. The footage got corrupted, and I had to, let's say, bring this video back to life. Oh, the irony. But because of that, let's get a more organized talk on it, if I can. I have issues with this spell. Namely, the issue I have with it in comparing it to other spells, similar to, well, it might not seem like it, similar to Planar Ally. This leaves DM judgment. Entirely. Planar Ally can be the best spell or the worst spell, work all the time, work only some of the time. It's the same thing for this. Because it's willing or at liberty. What determines both of those are things that the DM can set up. Yes, there are actual mechanical effects that can stop these two, but it doesn't strictly say if there's a mechanical effect stopping these two. Sometimes it can be setting dependent that gods just do not allow resurrection, or only allow a very few select people to actually be resurrected. So the majority of people you cast this on, it just won't work for. So it's not an automatic guarantee from the caster's point of view, or the caster using it, that it's going to bring the person that's targeted back. Like, let's say if you have a rich family that owns a bunch of diamond mines and has a cleric in their back pocket, it doesn't guarantee that this will work. Because gods might intervene, the afterlife might be funky, magic might not work necessarily that way. Also, it has to be a willing target, kind of. But who's not going to be willing to come back to life? Most of the time anyway. Because what this spell is used for is this is a player respawn. That's what it is. Mechanics-wise, if you want to talk mechanics of this spell, it's a player respawn. That's the role it's supposed to fill. So world-building-wise, sadly, it's shot. Because that's entirely up to system or table, and most likely it's not leaning towards that. I mean, you could have a system where diamond mines are the most valuable thing, and it almost always guarantees that, yeah, if you just target someone with this, it'll bring them back. That random peasant, that bandit, that king, that rich person that paid you a ton to actually use it. Or if you're in a setting where there's a judgment call based off some god or entity or magic acting funky, it might not. Put it this way, I know in a lot of different settings, or not even in settings, at a lot of different tables, there's some popular homebrew around resurrection spells, as in giving them a chance to fail. Mechanic, instead of just being a binary choice up to the DM whether it works or not. But that gets into some other gripes with resurrection spells in general. But outside of that, up to DM, up to table, up to setting on the actual effectiveness with willing and at liberty. Because 5th level is not that, it's high up there, but it's not that bad. 500 gold pieces can hurt, but also, we've seen more expensive components around this level. Also, automatically stitches up mortal wounds and any normal, mundane disease or effects on them. That's pretty good. Though you're not likely to be casting this in the middle of combat, so if it's a combat-based poison, that's alright. Because the reason you're not doing this in combat, it's an hour-long casting, and it's touch. Now, 10-day window is enough time that, yes, you can still drag them back within the hour or just after the encounter to cast this on them, but if you don't have the spell slot, and even if you're running the gritty realism where you need a week, you can still fit it within 10 days. Not to mention there's another spell that can actually push that another 10 days on top of it, and continuously. So if you could decidedly in setting pick up someone with Raise Dead, and it's almost guaranteed that the target you hit is going to come back, you could have an entire service of people that consistently cast that spell that preserves them, so lower level spellcasters can resurrect even if they've been dead for a long time. That's a very specific thing, also specific to setting. It's not even a question of up to interpretation, because this is such a core mechanic. It's a crutch mechanic. Okay, continuing with the spell. The undead question. Oh, also, yes, magical effects still lie on you. That kind of makes sense. Curses are all that. You can't really cheat that system. So if it's a lifelong, it's to stop like a lifelong curse or some grand campaign stretching curse from just killing and resurrecting instantly to bring him back. When it comes to undead, though, we have a question of classification. Is this to stop you touching a vampire or a zombie and instantly having them come back to life, like as a living person? Because technically they're still moving around and acting. But an undead is not necessarily dead, it's undead, but it's also not alive. But if you kill, or is this just undead in total? So if you kill an undead, like a zombie, does necromancy corrupt the soul? To that, or corrupt it in the sense it stops resurrection spells from working. And not just necromancy overall, but the animate spells around the specific nature of it. So you bring back someone as a zombie, you kill them, because it's a dead, but does it keep the undead tag? Because I don't think a troll stops technically being a troll or giantkin after it's dead. So if someone's a zombie, you kill them, does raise dead work? Or is it just to stop you from touching a zombie you're fighting with this, and they become the person again? Or a wight, or a vampire? Is it to avoid this being a cure for vampirism, essentially? I run with the ruling, just because I think it's more fun, and setting-wise, is that yes, tampering with something's soul does, in a sense, undeath makes them it takes away their liberty to come back. Oh, the best one is if you're killed near a lich's phylactery. Yeah, resurrection spells aren't working on you, bud. That's a warning for all my players in the current campaign. Anywho, outside of that personal threat, I run it that, yeah, animate, dead, and other such spells that tamper with the soul cage stops resurrection from working even after the effect is done. It just adds some stakes and some of the, like, evil factor to necromancy, if you are going with that kind of scheming. There's also the question as to how often is a body brutalized? Because yes, it's a player respawn mechanic, but how often do you take into account corpses getting damaged on the battlefield? Because, like, yeah, going to 0 might not... They have death saves, true. But then if they're hit by 3 subsequent fireballs, that corpse might be on fire. Or if they're being attacked by a pack of hungry wolves or ghouls or other things that, like, consume or tear or gouge. Man, is this video going to be monetized? It might not have the appropriate body parts. Or, if you are in a setting where resurrection's super common, people might purposely behead. Or double tap, essentially. I know that argument is a big thing with just healing spells alone to double tap. This video isn't getting monetized, is it? So, character goes down, death saves are kind of a known thing, or healing to potentially bring them back, or resurrection, or like bleeding out in a sense. Well, you might want to stop that, or enemies might know that's a thing, or if they're fighting adventurers, or if they've seen an adventurer use this before, like the party. They might purposely try to just make sure they go down. Or it's a mindless enemy that doesn't care. Because usually when... How to put it? Like, if it is a wild, raging beast or monster, it might just be hungry. It might stop to take a snack. Now, the actual usefulness of Raise Dead kind of shifts a bit in that sense. Of what happens to the body. Now, the minuses. If you're running a regular long rest game, that's about 4 days. Some minuses. Those are pretty bad, though. -4 to all attacks, saves, and ability checks. But it goes down to 3, 2, etc. But man, if you're running gritty realism, that sucks. But it should, that's the tax for coming back. But in general, world building wise, the spell's shot, if you ask me. In the sense that, I mean, it can be. If you are running a setting and the DM then takes it to its full lengths of there is no god or system or magic intervening, but the spell exists to allow the players to respawn. That's what it's been designed for. And yes, fantasy respawning is a thing that usually happens in systems. Like, an enemy coming back, whether it be some anime villain arc, or some kind of, oh no, the Death Star's been rebuilt. That's a drastic one, in a place, but you get what I mean. Characters arriving back in fiction or fantasy is relatively common. But when you see Raise Dead used in a game, that's almost always just on the player's side, as a backup mechanic for respawns like a video game. Though, fair to anyone that's actually using it with villains. I know clones used on occasion. I mean, that's a whole other thing with phylacteries and vampires being able to head back to their coffin. But a little more selective. Namely because Raise Dead, how often do you see NPCs using it? And usually, when I've been in games, or I've seen games that use Raise Dead with NPCs, it's, oh, head to the church, pay this amount of gold, this donation to the church, and your character comes back. It's a respawn mechanic. And that's got some gripes with it. Nothing against games that use it that way, just not up to my personal taste, and it messes with comparing the spell mechanically to anything else, because it really is left up to the specific campaign it's in. But, and the setting, and the DM's rule, it gets muddled. But, 8 out of 10. Because even with everything against it, it's a 5th level spell slot, it has a consumed, relatively expensive material component. I mean, 500 gold pieces is a lot. But we see more. There's a chance that the target is not willing or at liberty to. Doesn't affect undead. So depending on how that's... But, okay, the last 3 things, whether it's willing, whether it's at liberty, whether it's undead or not, and that whole situation, left up to interpretation and table. But because of those things... 8 out of 10 because it gets rid of the worst debuff in the game. Death. It's not a debuff, but that is... There's so few... like, all the resurrection set of spells. That is such a big... That's getting a player back. That's getting a character back. Without having to replace, without losing equipment, without potentially losing equipment. Like... That's huge. So access-wise, world-building-wise, it's entirely up to table in effect, similar to Planar Ally. It's up to a judgment call. But when it comes to players, yeah, it's amazing. Still a price, still a downside, still a tax in mechanics, still a tax in actual gold cost, which is where that rating comes in. 8 out of 10.